Well, the article appeared in many newspapers, not
Oh,
just
right,
Napa.
right, right. Do I have your permission to record, sir?
Yes.
Okay. On the phone with us now is Tom Elias, well-known columnist, author of, I think it was the Brzezinski profile, and he also wrote an article a few years ago that, if I'm not mistaken, led to the recall election of Governor Davis. Did I get that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, okay. Jumping right into it. This week there was an
That
article.
just shows how old I am, by the way, Marcus.
Well, but you know,
I was already doing this back then.
but that makes you an authority on the subject, that you've covered California politics and seen how the state, or
I've been doing that for over 50 years.
yeah. So I mean, you are somebody that understands government, understands California, and would be in a position to make the statement that you did in this article by Tom Elias on new fronts keep appearing in the Trump battle. New fronts, Trump, Tom Elias. You'll find the article came out this week, and I'll just repeat what I saw in the article that grabbed my attention.
Yeah.
Then there's a new Trump plan to encourage new oil drilling on federal lands around the state, including some bordering the Carrizo Plain National Monument, Sequoia, Kings Canyon National Park in the Nevadas. This move came just after Governor Gavin Newsom issued a state executive order cutting back both oil drilling and hydraulic fracking on private and state-owned lands as part of California's continuing move toward being less dependent on oil and other fossil fuels. Because the federal government controls nearly 46% of all land in California and a far higher percentage of undeveloped California lands, there's a strong possibility Trump's administration can make his plan stick, effectively negating anything Newsom might do on this front. Can California protect its lands from Donald Trump and the federal government, or can we not? That's the question.
That's going to be the subject of lawsuits.
Okay.
It's already the subject of lawsuits. We don't have any particular authority over lands that belong to the National Park Service or the National Forests or the Bureau of Land Management. We don't control those lands as a state, and with our elected state officials, they're controlled by the Department of the Interior and other Department of Agriculture and other federal agencies.
What grabs me is that I've been talking to people in California here for a little while. Last month, I was able to talk to Jonathan Taplin. He's a professor at USC. Dean of the School of Communications, very smart man, very smart professor. And when I talked to him about this, and I said, what if Trump drills for oil on the lands? He just quickly dismissed it. Oh, Marcus, that'll never happen. But Professor...
Well, it might not. It might not, but it could.
Well, but I said, Professor, how do you know that when they own the lands? And his only response was, this is California, we'll just never let it happen. But is that...
Well, there are ways the state can protect itself, or can make things difficult for drilling there. You have to remember, there's no drilling unless you get companies that want to go and drill there and pay for the licenses to do that, pay for the drilling rights in these areas. The government doesn't build the oil rigs. That's done by private companies that have purchased the rights to do that. And the government holds auctions periodically for oil drilling rights and other mineral rights on federal lands. That's how we have the oil wells off the coast. You've seen the wells in the Santa Barbara Channel and other places along the California coast, right? That's federal land.
Right.
It's beyond the 3-mile state limit,
right.
And the federal government gets royalties from that, and hopefully that reduces our tax bills a little bit. But the state has certain controls. Okay, just a moment here. Can you stop the recording for
Sure.
1 second?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a text message from the Frontier people. We'll let you know. Okay. Just a second here. I'm going to dictate a text. Work is required to call them. The problem is in the House. As described to frontier officials several times. Okay. So they texted me. That's just useless text. But anyway, so go ahead and let's go on.
Sure. So how do we know that
turn
we
back
can
the recorder. I'm going to tell you how can the state do this?
Yes.
Well, I think one of the best examples has to do with liquefied natural gas. Where back in the year 2007, the liquefied natural gas industry, and specifically an Australian company called BHP Billiton, were set to build an offshore platform off the coast of Ventura County near Oxnard that would have received liquefied natural gas. This was at a time before fracking, at a time when the United States was not producing all the natural gas that it uses the way it does now. Okay?
Okay.
The state was opposed to this. The state didn't want it. Some people in state government did want it, by the way, but other people wanted. Other people wanted to have this gas come in. Specifically, the big utility companies wanted it. PG&E, Southern California Gas, wanted this gas to come in, and they wanted to sell it because they would pay a certain amount for it, higher than the domestic rate for natural gas, and their profit is based on a percentage of what they pay. So if they get a 10% profit, 10% of $2 billion is twice as much as 10% of $1 billion.
Right.
So they want the more expensive product to then turn around and sell to their customers and make a lot more profit out of it. How was this stopped? Well, it was stopped because the State Lands Commission, which controls essentially the beaches and everything out to the mean high tide line as of the year 1922, which is some distance out to sea now, because the beaches have eroded quite a bit in that time, as you may know. They refused to let pipelines be put across the beach. And if you couldn't put pipelines across the beach anywhere, then you couldn't bring the gas on shore. And so there was no use in building a platform. You just have boats out there, or these big tankers out there, and what they're hauling would have nowhere to go. And so it wasn't built. And the same kind of thing could be done with fracking. If the state, for instance, resisted allowing the oil from the fracking on federal lands to be hauled on state highways, I don't know that they have the power to do that, but they might. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know every legal twist and turn, right?
Right.
But there might be ways in which the state could thwart this, other than simply denying the federal government the right to issue permits. They can't do that.
Right. We saw in 2018, Politico said that judge rules in favor of Trump administration in California federal lands case. California legislature passed Senate Bill SB 50, which would have given the California State Lands Commission the first right of refusal. U.S. District Court Judge for Eastern District, William Schnubb, said you can't do that and that's unconstitutional. What I found interesting was that January 9th, just a few days ago, you have Abbott and Kinderman, which is a land use firm based in Sacramento, saying that State Lands Commission said last year they were going to appeal that ruling. They've done no such thing.
Well, they still have time. There is always the Elias principle of American jurisprudence. You never run out of appeals until you run out of money.
But does it say something that California says, you don't get to sell federal land, you have to sell it to us first, and then a federal judge says, no, you can't do that, and just slaps it down hard, and then the State Lands Commission says, well, we're going to fight this, and then they do nothing for a year and a half. Are we supposed to believe as Californians that we have a legal right to fight back, or is this all fluff?
There are dozens of lawsuits going on right now between California and the federal government.
Sure.
So it's a matter of priorities. Which suits does the Attorney General want to file and when? Which things does he think are the most important? And it's true that this Attorney General is no different from any previous Attorney General of any party. That attorneys general, just like district attorneys, enforce the laws they like and ignore the ones they don't like. And so the Attorney General decides when a lawsuit is filed on behalf of the state. And so it's a matter of priorities, and that's politics.
Sure. But how do we know we could win? I mean, how do we know for sure Javier Becerra?
We don't. A lot of it depends on what judge you get. And then ultimately, the ultimate arbiter, if they want to take the case, is the U.S. Supreme Court. And some of them, justices there, do have a long-standing practice of voting for states' rights over federal rights. But that has been eroded. It used to be Republican justices that were very much that way. But over the last 20 years, that's changed a lot, especially now, because the Trump administration is constantly trying to run roughshod over state governments, not just California.
Right, and the Supreme Court seems to be majority conservative. I think it was 2 months.
Well, but see, conservatives have tended to traditionally favor states' rights.
Fair enough. However, I would point out...
So we don't know exactly how something like that might go right now, is the point. Yes, the Trump-appointed justices might vote for him automatically or reflexively. And then again, they might not. Sometimes these judges surprise people.
I know 2 months ago, the federal Supreme Court overturned 50 years of precedent. It used to be that you had to, if you had environmental regulations on your land and you felt they were onerous and hurt you, you had to go to state court. And then depending on that, if you didn't get the resolution you wanted, you could go to the federal court. The Supreme Court said you can skip state court and go right to federal court. And they based that decision on a California case. So basically saying, hey, if you're upset about California environmental regulations, you can skip California and go right to the federal government. And that happened a few months ago and overturned 50 years of precedent. Shouldn't we be scared to see something like that, knowing that a land use case may go in front of this same body?
Well, ultimately, even if the case is fought in the state courts, the ultimate arbiter, if you want to appeal from the California State Supreme Court, you can only appeal to the federal Supreme Court. That's the only body that's over them. And they do have that jurisdiction and always have had over every state Supreme Court in the country. So that's nothing new.
Okay. Well, last one.
Yep.
Gavin Newsom vetoes a bill just a few months ago that would have put a permanent block on all of Trump's rollbacks on environmental protection. Gavin Newsom said this: Senate Bill 1 does not provide the state with any new authority to push back against Trump's administration's environmental policies. That bill was supported by both houses in the legislature, very positive in California, struck down by the governor because he said, it seems to be, we can't actually tell the federal government what to do.
No, we can't. We cannot. If there's a conflict between federal law and state law, federal law automatically prevails. The reason that California has long had unique authority over air quality and smog control in California is because that's written into federal law.
Okay.
The Congress passed that, and Congress gave the state that authority as part of the Clean Air Act, which is a federal law. So that's not based on a state thing. That's the state taking advantage of a federal law. So, yeah, I think Newsom did the right thing. The passage of that law was a symbolic act by the legislature.
Right.
I mean, the legislature is two-thirds Democratic. They don't like Donald Trump.
What? I'm joking.
So that's it.
I'm joking.
No. That's it. So they do symbolic things.
So
and Newsom says, why bother? You're just making trouble.
Right. So what I see is I see Californians saying we're going to fight Trump, we'll stop whatever he does, and then I see these little snippets from politicians saying, I'm not sure we could actually just tell the federal government what to do, and it sounds like you're saying.
Well, I wrote a few years ago that when the spate of lawsuits by the current Attorney General Xavier Becerra, when that began, I said that those lawsuits would take several years to be resolved.
Okay.
And that's happening.
Okay.
But that several years is winding down now, and a lot of these lawsuits are now up to the highest level of the courts, and will be decided pretty soon. Which means that if these cases are all resolved in the favor of the federal government, that means Donald Trump can run roughshod in California if he gets elected to a second term.
That's what I was looking for. I just needed somebody with an authority to actually say, yes, that can actually happen.
If he gets elected to a second term, there will be very, very few constraints upon him, because he never has to face the voters again.
And he'll be able to complete his, I think, shift of all lower federal courts and the Supreme Court to be conservative. I'm not mistaken. We're 2 judges on the Ninth Circuit Court away from it being a conservative court, which it hasn't been in 40 years.
Well, that could happen. That could happen. He's had the luck of having a lot of federal judges die off. And that could happen on the Supreme Court.
Fair enough.
That's luck for him.
Right.
Bad luck for other people, and certainly for the people who died off. Well, we don't really know. I haven't been dead yet, so I don't really know what it's like.
Ginsburg is barely holding on. I like her, but every other week it's a health scare with her. I don't see her holding on.
That's right, Marcus. Anyway, all right, so do we resolve some of this?
We are good, and thank you for the interview. I really appreciate it. Is there ways you'd like people listening to contact you, or any articles you'd like them to look at and think about?
Well, they can look at anything I have written in the last 10 years on the website www.californiafocus.net.
Okay, and that's Tom Elias. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.